Software Careers with Jeffrey Palermo.
The Azure DevOps Podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Each show brings you hard-hitting interviews with industry experts, innovating better methods, and sharing success stories. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your host for helping you and your teams move fast, deliver quality, and to run your software with confidence in Azure, all while using everything that the .NET ecosystem has to offer. This podcast is sponsored by ClearMeasure, a software architecture company that empowers .NET teams to be self-sufficient and able to deliver world-class results. They are hiring architects as well as .NET engineers who would like a path to become an architect. And finally, be sure to check out the new video shows. Our guest for today is Jeffrey Palermo. Hey, wait, that's me. Yep, this show is a quick sidebar from our normal industry guests, just to talk about all the different types of careers in the software industry. And this audience is primarily for .NET developers, but even within that, there's been some questions that have come my way. And by the way, I've been a little bit remiss in promoting how you can get a hold of me. If you have any questions for the show, just send them to podcast@palermo.network. That's PALERMO.network. podcast@palermo.network. And I'd love to make sure we have a guest that can address that situation or just answer your questions directly. Really, anything is fair game. Anybody who is shipping software using .NET and using the Microsoft platform, that's what we're here for. But I want to take a quick aside and talk about the different types of software jobs across the software industry, because I recognize that half of you out there have been in the industry from 0 to 7 years. And of course, my first paid programming job was in 1997. And so sometimes I take for granted all the different things and industry conversations I've been a part of. Whereas when I was starting out, nobody actually told me what all the possible jobs were and what options there were. So I just wanted to cover those and talk about a little bit of industry trends. You can go on Indeed and Monster and LinkedIn and all these job sites, and you will see a plethora of job titles. And it's sometimes hard to sort out what these are. So I want to kind of attempt a categorization. And by the way, I am going to leave out somebody's job title that just is the way it's going to be. But if you're working in a company that produces and ships a software product, then there's going to be a founder of that company. And sometimes if they're software products, the founder of that company is a programmer. But there's also going to be a product visionary. There's going to be an architect that, they choose the major patterns and materials. And there's also going to be developers. These are builders of the software. And there's a lot of corollaries in the construction world too. There's actually a lot of synonyms. For instance, developer, that's an overloaded term. With software developers, well, there's a lot of builders that say, "Oh, I have a development company," and they're land developers. But developers are the builders. And then of course you need customer and user support, and then you need sellers. You need people who are going to be selling the software. And in decades past, many popular jobs have come along and been really popular and then kind of waned in popularity. Software testers used to be a really popular job. And companies like Microsoft had 2 testers for every software engineer writing code, and that doesn't happen anymore. Now, testers, there's just fewer across the industry. There's also project managers, there's program managers, there's Scrum. There were a surge of Scrum masters, and that's kind of waned across the industry as a dedicated title. Software engineers, sysadmins, DBAs, just tons of different job titles. And more specialized job titles are everywhere. And I wanted to mention, there's no standard job title for people who work in software. And of course, if you're now saying, "Hey, you left me out, I have a job title of such and such," well, I'm sure I did. But let's talk about the overall functions that you have to have in order to ship software, functions that you need on your team, regardless of what the job titles are. And for small teams, each person can wear many hats. That's perfectly normal, but you want to make sure you don't leave out that function. You don't want to leave out that responsibility. So recognize the gap. So let me just put it in layman's terms. To build and ship a piece of software, you need 7 categories of work. You need to envision the software. You need to design it. You need to build it. You need to sell it to customers. You need to operate it, keep it running. You need to maintain it, kind of change the oil, change the tires. And then you need to improve it. 7 different functions. Now, think about building a commercial building. It's kind of the same stuff. Envision what this, multi-story condo tower could be in downtown of the city. Then somebody needs to design it. Then somebody needs to build it. Somebody needs to sell all the units in it so that it starts producing revenue. And then someone needs to maintain it, from as simple as repainting every so many years to changing the air conditioning filters, whatever needs to be maintained in that building. You need to operate it, keep the electricity, keep the water flowing, keep the guests cycling in and out. If it's a condo where people come and go, any kind of vacation rental units, who knows? And then you need to improve it over time. Maybe things get outdated and it needs to be renovated every so many years, or maybe people complain or there's some difficulties. You need to just improve it and do some type of renovation. Those things have been around for a long time, and they're the same in the software world. And let me just break down each one. Envisioning it. Someone needs to, if it's a new piece of software, someone needs to effectively write the press release text before we start. We need to write some sort of text as the announcement of the software so that we can get everybody involved going in the same direction. How would we announce this product? How would we start shouting it out that this software product is out there? This is what it does. This is the problem it solves. There's some people just in regular life have talked about the concept of writing your own obituary, kind of asking the question, when I've lived my life and I'm dead, my friends and family are burying me, what is going to be said at my funeral? And then backing up and planning our lives just to make sure that those things can be said when our lives are being celebrated at our funeral. And so it's the same thing with a software product. Start with the end in mind, write your press release, and that effectively is your vision. Now back up and start designing it. There's some things that you have to design on day one, even do anything else. And then there's other lower level design elements that can be added on. But somebody needs to decide all the different elements of design, starting with architecture, platform choices. There's a lot of discussions today about Blazor and Maui because it's been several years where for SPI applications, Angular and React have kind of got a lot of traction. But now with Blazor being on its 3rd major version, the version that came out with .NET 6, Blazor is rock solid. And now Blazor is the go-to SPA framework. If you want a URL launched app and your team's core skill set is C# and .NET, well, Blazor is a slam dunk for the major platform decision. And then, of course, on the back end, are you going to be running in Azure? Are you going to be running on your own servers or VMs? Are you going to be running all in containers? Those big decisions. And some can be put off for a little bit, but some you have to make up front. But that's all part of design. There's technical design, but then there's also user experience design, the screen flow, how you want the software to look. Is it going to be in your pocket on a smartphone mostly, or is it going to be used in a desktop software mostly? Those are all elements of design. Design is not just technical. How a person experiences the software is a huge part of design.
Many thanks to our podcast sponsor, ClearMeasure. ClearMeasure is a software architecture company that empowers clients' development teams to be self-sufficient.
moving fast, delivering quality, and running their systems with confidence. Whether starting a new project or developing new technologies or techniques, ClearMeasure sets up your team to deliver world-class results. Learn more at www.clearmeasure.com. ClearMeasure, empowering software delivery.
And again, these are not phases where you have to do all of one before you do any of the other. Now, envisioning at the beginning, you do have to have a clear vision. But as far as the design, you get the high points, and then you can start building the parts of the design that have been fleshed out. And building it, of course, goes on. And you don't have to finish building everything in software before you can start selling what you have to some of the customers. So somebody needs to sell it, whether it's automated sales, kind of like e-commerce, kind of like software as a service, or whether you have a person that has the title of salesman. And then operating it, this is one where a lot of developers have multiple hats, where they also function as the sysadmin, operating the software. The title DevOps is grown in popularity. Somebody needs to operate the software and keep it running. If it goes down, if it's slow, if it's sluggish, if it's throwing errors, those are all things where it's not operating well. And day to day, monitoring is part of operating. If we don't keep tabs on how the software is working, then we're not going to operate well. And a lot of times, developers will start being the operators initially, but as software grows and has more and more people using it and gets them to be either a higher scale system, or scale as in transactions, or scale as in maybe just numbers of users, it's often prudent to have dedicated people being operators and not have that fall on the same developers that built it. And then there's the maintain. Maintain typically is a developer skill set, but it doesn't have to be the same developers, and it very rarely is the same developers who built it initially to maintain it. And it's just like in a building. There's oftentimes there's a crew who is going to build the high rise, and that crew is typically not the same people who maintain it for 10, 20 years. But there's a lot of people who maintain buildings that they didn't build. And so both are important. And oftentimes for new products, the initial developers are going to maintain it for a little bit, but then that's going to be handed off. And then there's the improve. Sometimes maintain and improve get conflated. And changing the oil and doing regular servicing, maintaining would be from time to time, doing certain security patches or library upgrades, upgrading from .NET 5 to .NET 6, that would be a maintenance item. But then improving is over time. I've operated this thing and I've maintained it, and we really need to renovate this particular function. We need to change the way it works, and we need to improve it. We've learned a lot about how it goes, and that's where the building of the software is iterative over time. We operate and collect data. We maintain it and see what areas of the system are more costly to maintain than others. And then all of that fuels our decisions about how to improve it. Now, before I close, I wanted to talk a little bit about security, because one of the 7, it was not that buzzword. And everybody always asks, what about security? Because that's one that has really gotten a lot of companies in trouble that depend on software. Security is a growing field. It's already huge, but it's a growing field of expertise. And, there's some bad attacks that have happened. And it's prudent for organizations to reduce the risk of an attack, of a security breach, of data theft. And let's go to the building analogy again. If you want a building to be secure, then you have to do all 7 of these phases. You have to envision what you mean for it to be secure. Does be secure mean that we only want residents of the building coming in plus their guests, or only the people with the code? Or does secure mean that nobody but a short white labeled list can even come within 1,000 feet of the building because we have a courtyard with Constantine barbed wire around the top of the wall. So we have to define what our vision of secure is. Does it need to be secure against a car crashing into it versus just someone rattling the doorknob and then going away? If someone has a battering ram, sometimes they can come in a locked door because deadbolts don't really protect against battering rams. So we need to define what our vision for secure is, and then we need to design those aspects. Design it to predict, detect, and thwart attackers. We obviously no one would have a vision that their software system, that their database could be accessed by unwarranted people, or that data could be stolen. So that's normal, but we have to say those things out loud and design those aspects in, because anytime we move data across, we need to be able to enumerate what our transport is and what type of encryption that we have in transit, what type of encryption we have at rest, how people can access the different components of the software that have the keys to decrypt data and use it in its raw format. So a lot of design discussions ago. And then we need to build those in. And part of the building is deciding test cases to put into our automated test suite that test against these security capabilities. Then we need to operate the security features. We need to monitor the security features and operating, which a lot of times includes tracer bullets to kind of shoot attacks at the system and make sure that the system properly thwarted those attacks. We need to maintain the security measures that we put in place and constantly gather data to learn about it, and gather data about attacks that we have successfully thwarted. And then over time, we can improve it because we have a lot of data. We can look at the frequency of external attacks on our system and how often they happen, where they come from, and then over time improve things. So that, security is just an example of a cross-cutting concern where it is a characteristic of our software system that still needs to run through all 7 of the different types of work that it takes to build in a software system. So that's the run through of the different types of software work. And so if you are a developer in a small team, recognize that all of these things need to get done. And if there's not someone else who specifically has the job of envision or design or build or sell or operate or maintain or improve, then likely that's your job. And as your team grows, just be conscious about when is the appropriate time to get one or more of these things onto distinct different people. In my career, I've certainly done every single one of these roles. And I've been less concerned about the job title as the job function. And kind of later in my career, I've simplified titles. I call myself a computer programmer. If I don't say computer programmer, I tend to go to the term software engineer instead of software developer, because with extreme programming, test-driven development, automated builds, the DevOps engineering practices, in my opinion, software engineer is a more stricter and disciplined title than software developer. But that's just personal preference. And then there are definitely software managers, software engineering managers who manage the engineers. And then there are architects who sometimes manage, but really the software architect is bridging between the vision and the design and equipping a number of software engineers to be successful in building and then operating and maintain until a product kind of gets off the ground. And oftentimes the testing aspect is split between the people who are working in the envisioning, the selling, and then the improving. And so, there's people who are not coders by trade. They contribute really well in envisioning. They contribute really well in user experience design. They contribute really well in selling, and they contribute really well in making plans to improve the software. So if you have an idea to kind of throw in the mix, or there's something I missed, absolutely send me an email at podcast@palermo.network. I'd love to hear from you. And until next time, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure DevOps Podcast, a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Go to www.azuredevops.show for show notes and other episodes. On behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, and our sponsors, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.